Do know that we're going to have multiple pathways for communication. We do have, a set agenda for today, and I'll go through that, what the intent is of this session. Yet we do want to make this interactive, so please do use the chat function. I do want to withhold raising hands and asking questions verbally until the end, but use the chat function. And we also have a Padlet where we can get information. Thank you, Natalie. Natalie just added the Padlet into the chat, where we will have some questions and some feedback loop there as well. The great thing with Padlet is if you do not want to put your name, it can be anonymous, but you can ask your questions there or give us feedback and content at that point. This track, this session, making sure you're in the right one, is for working adults. That's the terminology we're using. Our old school terminology is reentry adult student population. Reentry centers, many of us, kind of grew up with in the California community colleges. We're using the term working adults. That can refer to 18-year-olds that are out working in a field, that have work experience, all the way up to our seniors coming back with some, longer careers in certain fields. Next slide. The agenda for today, we really have three main segments. One is, can you do this? And I'm sorry for, I see some of the folks that are long in the tooth and gristled at this stuff. You've been around the policy and the regulations enough. This might be a rehashing. The reason for this is we have many newbies, many new institutions that are potentially a little skittish on bestowing direct course credit or transfer credit to students, because you just haven't gone through that process before. So we'll go through guidelines and policies in why you can really allow for CPL, transcripting of CPL at your institution. This slide deck also serves as a resource for you. You will receive all of these slide decks, and we'll also throw that in the Padlet so you can bring it back to your institution. Beg, borrow, and steal. We're publicly funded, so we believe this should be transparent and open to everybody. So if there's any of the policy items that you want to walk into a room and say, actually, you know what, Title V says this, we want to give you that ammunition to do what's right for our students and right for our programs as well. Number two is the one that I'm uber excited about. Sigrid and I and Chad and a few of the faculty from our field are going to be sharing some existing articulations. So industry to college credit articulations that exist in our field that you may want to consider on your own campus. So we really want to nudge you that these are pretty solid articulations you can adopt within MAP. Or you can just have that conversation with your auto tech instructor or engineering instructor to say, hey, would you consider some of these pathways? We're trying to give you the easy button on this. And I know a lot of institutions have asked for that. Just show me what other people are doing. That's what MAP is about, is trying to be incredibly transparent institution to institution. So we're here to show you about 4 different exhibits, evidence of CPL. And then lastly, we'll talk about building your strike team and your next steps on your campus. Know that Padlet is linked in the chat, and we also will have the QR code up in the top right of a few of our slides, so you can link to that. We are recording this slide. Oh, Lenny, are you recording? I want to make sure you know that we are recording this session. Closed captioning is still available at the base of your Zoom link or Zoom platform, and please give us some feedback as we go forward. We do have the ability to unmute you towards the end when we get into the Q&A section. Next slide. All right, can we do this? Yes, you can. That's the answer. That's the simple answer. You are permitted to do credit for prior learning. It's all based on the unique situation of the student. So just because Lassen College has incredible ASE certification crosswalks to their auto tech program, a student needs to walk in with those certifications, and it needs to apply to their specific pursuit, right? If they're going to apply credit, and just like that high school student that came in with AP credit, if they're looking at a rate of a certificate that does not have general ed, and your AP scores are in general ed areas, that's not really applicable to their degree pathway, their certificate pathway. So it has to be uniquely situated to that student. I still would argue you do want a repository of articulations for CPL, but when you're applying that credit, it needs to fit that student's pathway, right? So where did this stuff come from? Where did the whole kind of initiative with MAP and CPL come from? It actually started back in 2012 with a Marty Block bill. So we're talking 11 years plus of effort from a legislative side. And then in about 2015, 2016, there were other legislators that were highly interested, including Assemblywoman Cervantes. There were others that were involved, and Senator Roth. There were multiple legislative efforts. What I want to impress to you is that faculty were involved in crafting much of that. So as you see that the statewide academic senate very high on the idea of credit for prior learning, it's because we wanted to be involved. I was a faculty member at the time. We wanted to be deeply involved and ingrained to ensure that disciplined faculty, when it's course for course, that disciplined faculty were woven into the process. You'll see that as we talk about these articulations today. The other piece is we didn't want to harm students in terms of their SAP and financial aid. You'll hear that a lot. A reason to say no to CPL, financial aid implications, VA implications. Yeah, that is true. So you want to be wise with a counselor involved in the application of that credit for prior learning so it doesn't harm a student. If their transfer pathway is to an institution that doesn't accept our credit for prior learning, you want to have them fully aware. You want to be transparent on the portability and the reciprocity of that CPL. Right? So it's all about doing what's right by the student, but also that faculty member and the counselor deeply involved in decision-making process. As you see here, implementation pathway, it's great to hear the state chancellor very involved, but you can see that there's incredible momentum. This is when the skillet's hot. So we want to do this right and get our colleges deeply involved. Next step. All right, guiding principles, Title V. It's section 55050. There are multiple sections to it. Some kind of feel like they are opposed to it, which is really common in guideline and policy. To me, it's very clear. I was involved. I was one of the many people that was involved in helping craft this, my tiny little small part. So I knew the internal conversations, and most of this language wasn't intended to be opposed to each other. It was really intended to empower faculty, empower colleges, and then empower students. So you want to look at it with that lens. What's pretty interesting is we speak to transparency and accessibility. You know, folks need to know what's going on, how this is done. Policies need to be given to the students. How that is done at your institution is going to be based off of your local autonomy, your local choice. In session 2, we will go over some recommendations on that transparency, on how to allow the community and your students and frankly local industry to understand your CPL pathways. Next slide. This is an interesting one. Sigrid, she's a administrative justice faculty and chair and CPL coordinator down at Norco College. She's taught at the Cal State level and at the community college level, and she has a ton of work experience as well. So she's like this unicorn in this process, but she always points to this one and says, subject matter similar to that of the individual's prior learning. The competencies that the individual's gained needs to be similar to the course content. It doesn't need to be, word for word identical to the student learning outcomes. And we miss that a lot. We get fixated on the 1920s concept that Andrew Carnegie created of Carnegie units, right? And I understand that. Today's learning is based on competencies and skills, what learning has been done, not necessarily what it took for you to get that learning. I want to push back, and I'll basically give you an example. Do we ask of someone's attendance record when they bring in an AP score for US history of 5? Well, show me your attendance record. I need to show how much time you put to learn that. No, we don't. When someone comes in with a CLEP for a language, do we ask, how did you learn that language before you took the CLEP? We don't. So I do believe time on task and lecture hour equivalence is important, but when we hang our shingle on that alone, we're missing the boat when someone is competent and ready for the next level of a course. When in doubt, you can lean on credit by examination if you want to show evidence of learning, but we need to open ourselves up to this section D where the key word is similar to the subject matter. Next slide. This is another piece that a lot of institutions get hung up on, so we felt we needed to, kind of roll this out and have a discussion on it. Credit can be given for IGETC, CSU breadth, and your local graduation and GE requirements. So there are situations, military credit for prior learning, a nuclear sub-technician has had at least 4 units, Carnegie unit equivalent of 4 units in physics. Well, if that individual is going to major in history and the ACE recommendation is 4 units in physics, can you apply that to the general ed? The CSU says yes, right? So we have the flexibility. It's going to be based on the unique situation of that student, right? If it doesn't necessarily fit directly course for course, can you use it for general ed? I believe the language allows for that. I believe that actually, I know specifically CSU campuses are already doing this, where many of our campuses are not. So if you look, if you're in the San Diego region, you look at San Diego State, they transparently on their webpage for veterans show the credit recommendations that they accept in their general education pattern. Cal Poly Pomona does. Many of the campuses do. So when we force them to take certain courses that they already have cleared through other prior learning and competencies, we're making them take redundant courses. So again, I point to this general ed piece. It is in Title V. It is allowable. Just want to portray that to you folks. Slide. Know that there is a direct alignment with Title V, which was created back around 2019 or so, and our Vision 2030. Chancellor Christian went into this pretty significantly, as did Mitra from the ASCCC. So I don't need to rehash this, but understand that Vision 2030 is direct alignment with this effort in MAP and CPL. Guiding principles for the CSU. We can add that link in the chat if we have it, but know that the link is in here. As Dr. Foster spoke to, the CSU campuses must be adopting this. There is a statewide CSU policy to accept our credit for prior learning for students that have partial or full general education certification or already have their ADT, and we applied that within the ADT. They are compelled, the campuses are compelled to accept that transcribed credit for prior learning if it is for a requirement, for a course, okay? So it stems from their executive order 1036. It is transparently open on the webpage, their policy link. And if you do face any issues with your students and transferability or portability of what you've transcribed, say, someone attended Palomar College and is transferring over to Cal State San Marcos, and San Marcos unpacks that credit prior learning and pushes back, we've been asked to report that up to the state chancellor's office, right? Because that should not be happening. Based on policy, if there's partial GE certification, CSU GE certification, full GE certification, or an ADT, they should accept that credit for prior learning as transcribed at our institution. If we do not transcribe it, again, that falls on our lap. We must transcribe that CPL. Next slide. Now the UC is a whole different ball of wax. So for the transfer pathways, just being frank and honest with you, UCs do accept credit for prior learning with limitations. Okay, so AP exams, IB, that is credit for prior learning, right? But when it comes, let's look at military, those joint services transcripts they need to be reviewed after acceptance into the UC. So applying that up front, my encouragement as a counselor is always lean, I think it's the second bullet there, when in doubt, use credit by examination. If someone comes in as a crypto linguist out of the Marine Corps, you want them to take the credit by exam for Spanish or Tagalog or what have you. So UC is very limited with the credit for prior learning that's used. In general, to understand that philosophy, it's because each campus works autonomously. They also work autonomously from the state government, so they can't be legislated. It can be encouraged, but it can't. There cannot be a directive from the state legislature on these. So this is actually directly from the UC counselor webpage. I just took a screenshot, so you have access to it right here. It can change, so I should have that date stamped as of last week. But this is their policy for credit for prior learning. I always, again, recommend, when in doubt, have them go to the discipline faculty for credit by examination. That actually has the highest transferability of any kind of CPL that we have. Unfortunately, it gives an extra step. In some campuses still even charge for credit by examination, but we have a lot fewer of our students that are reentry students transfer to the UC, and part of it is theoretical basis of some of those courses just don't align as much typically with CPL. Next slide. Okay, I'll quickly go through this for the sake of time. Just know that the ASCCC has significantly done some work in CPL. It really comes down to local campuses and local districts. And that's what the Senate, the statewide senator, is really saying is we encourage this, but we also know that you have local decision making. And there are potentially additional SLOs on your history course compared to the one down the street at another community college. So there are differences that occur. So yes, they have resolutions that they've put forward in support. They come and endorse our events, but it comes to local control. Would be nice if, say, ASE certification in automotive was kind of aligned across the state, but each campus has to adopt that credit for prior learning. That's how the system works. Next slide. Okay, now we're going to get into really the what recommendations faculty have in the field. We're going to go through 4 of these. So please do. I know there's some questions that have gone in the chat, and I'm sorry, in speaking, I'm not able to address some of those. We'll try to get back to those a little bit later. Please do put them in the Padlet as well as we go along. Recommended CPL from the MAP initiative. What I'd like you to do, if there is a link in the chat, if you could answer that first question, what are the major challenges? I believe that's the first question in our Padlet, the challenges or roadblocks at your campus. And it's anonymous, but what are you guys seeing as things that are hindering CPL pathways and students receiving credit on your campuses? We're going to go through a few of these, and we're going to start with electronics technology. Natalie? Okay, this first sample is actually from Norco College. It's from an apprenticeship. It's from the IBEW apprenticeship. And what happened is there were several students that were learning in an apprenticeship, the first 3 years of an apprenticeship. And then they wanted to get a non-transferable, but a certificate from Norco College. And the instructor had a relationship back and forth through the local union and Norco College. So that instructor sat down and had a conversation with the senior evaluator and the AO, and they actually came to a full crosswalk of the apprenticeship work and those student learning outcomes aligned with these 400 level electronics technology courses. In the past, this is why this is an interesting one. It is a one college, it's not a collaborative. So, we want to point out some of these collaborative multi-campus CPL pathways. This one specifically, it was a common occurrence that these students would come into Norco College and have advanced placement. And so the conversation began. These students said, well, why am I not getting credit? If you're having me skip these courses, saying that I have evidence of competency and learning, and I can skip through multiple courses in your certificate program, why can't I get credit for those if I've shown that I've learned the subject matter? So the conversation really came from that. And if you guys reflect back on your campus, how many times have you said, oh, you qualify for Spanish 3? Right? And you don't have to take Spanish 1. Well, if I showed the competency, why can't I have the credit for that competency? What mechanisms do you have in place on your campus to kind of tackle that so the student can receive credit for that prior learning, that prior competency? That's where this came from. I thought it was very interesting. An apprenticeship is something new in terms of doing CPL. So I wanted to unveil this one to you. If you can go to the next slide, Natalie, and it shows the exact courses. Yeah, they're 400 level courses. These aren't electronics technology transfer courses that they aligned with. They were misaligned with those transfer level ones. That's fine. These individuals wanted to get into year 4 of the certificate program to receive again, like I said, a non-transferable certificate through Norco College. And the discipline faculty, the AAO, and the evaluator came to an agreement. They did a review and said, let's stop giving the advanced placement. Let's process these individuals if they have evidence, documentation of those first few years of their apprenticeship. Let's give them credit and then get them into a pathway to finish a certificate. So this one's an interesting one to consider. It is in our MAP system, so it can be adopted. The second session, Natalie will be going through how the MAP system works to adopt other institutions credit for prior learning. And I'll jump on to the next one. And then Chad, if you want to talk a little bit about your experience with this with the ASCCC.
Sure. So my name is Chad Lewis, and I was an automotive instructor at Lassen College for a number of years. And I was part of a group of other instructors that worked with the Chancellor's Office and the statewide academic senate to kind of come up with a crosswalk for the automotive programs. And in there on the slide is the list of instructors that kind of were part of this. And what we discussed is just, what's the cleanest, easiest way to do that. And in automotive, it's easy with industry certification. So the ASE certifications are broken down by subject. So for example, the A1 is your engine repair certification. And most programs, their courses are going to be broken similar to this. So it's really an easy fit per course. If a student comes into with a certain job experience or ASC certification, it's really pretty simple to cross walk that over. The concern of the group when we were discussing this was recency of the certification or experience. If a student came in and they were a mechanic in the 80s, well, cars are way different now than they were in the 80s, so that's a concern. At the end of the day, it's up to the local faculty member to decide, do we give credit, do we not give credit? Generally, the group felt that the ASC certification, for example, needed to be current, and those are good for 5 years. So, but within 10 years, it was really felt strongly that they need to be able to prove either certification or industry experience within that 10 years. But again, it was up to the instructor. And some of these a little bit are, a little bit more forgiving. So for example, brakes, the foundation brakes are fairly similar, but they've changed a lot and who's been out of the industry may not realize that. So that was kind of the discussion as far as how we came up with the certification being an easy fit. And this also works for military training or courses as well. The instructor would just have to kind of look at the content of the training, the title of it, and see how it compares to the course outline or record. But generally, it's pretty straightforward in the automotive field to be able to make those connections. And then, so pretty much job experience and ASC certifications were the big easy ones for automotive. When we did get this set up at our campus, the Senate came up with a pathway to do that. It's really pretty simple. The form is easy to do at our campus. And again, that's going to vary from campus to campus. Then the faculty member just looks at the student transcripts or certifications. And then on our campus, they even made a stipend available for instructors to create these crosswalks just to make that process easier. And that way, it just made it easy for the student to be able to get credit for it.
That's awesome, Chad. Hey, thanks a ton. And you brought up a couple themes that I'll just touch on real quickly. One is the recency or current license, right? There's the argument back and forth on the need for that based off of discipline. And some feel that's uber relevant. And I could see in your field as things change with automotive technology that really would be a standard. In other areas, it's kind of I wouldn't say stagnant, but there's less leaps and bounds in that technology, and therefore the recency or currency isn't as important. I think that's a great one. The other is how to skin the cat. Can you peel aside release time or stipends for faculty to do this hard work? Because it's not easy. And to be honest, reviewing one student for a credit by exam is one thing, but reviewing a full industry is going to take time. It's dozens and dozens of hours potentially, depending on the area. So thank you, Chad.
Yeah, thank you.
We have about 20 more minutes and two more, but the post one's going to take a while. So let me jump on over and hand the baton over to Megan with EMT EMS.
Can you hear me okay? Got it? Okay, great. Hi, everybody. I'm Megan Corry. I'm the Credit for Prior Learning Coordinator at City College of San Francisco. I'm also full-time faculty in our emergency medical services programs. So I worked with Todd Legassick, who I have known for many years from our industry. So all of our industries are like small towns, so we know each other from other things. And then the amazing articulation officer, Aaron, from West Los Angeles College. And we worked on the articulation in the MAP system. So emergency medical services is a pathway in itself, and there are levels of EMS providers from the basic through the advanced. So they're set in national education standards. So there's state statutes and regulations that recognize, each of these levels. And in some cases, they specify elements of things like the curriculum, hours, and competencies as well. But EMT is a basic level provider, and the state uses National Registry as the exam for state certification. So this means that EMT programs across the state are really standardized, and someone with an industry credential of a state EMT certification is a great candidate for credit for prior learning if they didn't receive college credit already for their original training. So the big question is, why might they need credit? And I think Terence addressed this. So I do a curriculum impact report in Curricunet and look at what the course has, what programs it's part of. And they may be, it's the entry to a lot of careers, but also it's a course within, a lot of associate degrees, fire science or allied health or paramedic. And if it's within that, again, waiving and doing assigning waivers and equivalencies is not providing the college credit. And we actually had a recent case where a student had been, a waiver had been signed, but he was shy of a few credits for the associate degree for fire science, for one of the fire science associates. And so having that credit would have bumped him over. And that was one of the ways we got the interest kind of going. So one of the issues, and you can see it on the screen now, is how does it appear on the transcript? So here's an example from Moreno Valley College. And if you notice two things that I just wanted to highlight, one is this program is 2 courses. So an EMT course may be a single course, or it may be your college may have 2 courses, or you may have a different number of units because you have, something, a prerequisite or whatever. They're usually within a couple of units. So that's something that may kind of, if you're new to this, may make you say, well, wait a second, ours is slightly different. It actually, it doesn't matter for us. We were, when we went through the comparison of the 2 programs at West LA and San Francisco, we were fine with the credit recommendation that will be adopted at our college being, the same as we came up with for West LA. The other thing you'll notice is that the grade here is a pass. So one of the things that we ran into is the base course needs to have that as an option, a pass, no pass as an option in order to put that on the transcript. So if you currently have letter only, that might be something as a CPL coordinator that you kind of work with your AO and your curriculum chair to, look at those courses and see how they are currently graded out. So, and just a general piece of CPL advice before you move on is if you are a new coordinator out there, we just had our first CPL Flex Day session. We decided to have mid-semester Flex Day sessions on CPL, and we just had our first one, and we had over 200 people show up on Zoom. So that is, the demand is there, the interest is there, and the questions are there. And they were from across the college, A&R, counseling, faculty, everyone, veterans, of course. So I think we're just going to plan on that to keep that college-wide dialogue going. I also have an email, cpl@ccsf.edu, so I can separate my faculty work from my CPL work. And if you have any input or questions, I'm cpl@ccsf.edu.
Awesome. Thanks so much, Megan. There's a couple themes that you brought up that I think are important. That grading option is something you really need to dig into at your institutions. Megan had a big uphill climb when we first met her last year, and has done tremendous work up at City College of San Francisco. But as you kind of unfurl the onion, there's a lot to it, right? With CPL and touch a lot of different units. I will touch on another piece, though. Someone put in the chat about funding. There is dialogue, and it needs to be done very thoughtfully with a lot of different constituency groups involved, but there is dialogue about how to fund credit for prior learning. We do not want to get into the situation of funding direct CPL and then having the sniff that we become a degree or diploma mill, right? Just give CPL in order to start receiving funding. Now, on the other side, it is hard work, and there needs to be some funding that trails students' assessment and application of transcribed CPL. So there has to be a balance there. There are people smarter than myself that will sit in that room, but know that there is statewide dialogue about how do we not lose FTES. Students that receive CPL actually take more courses, to be honest, in nationwide studies, significantly more units. But on the other side, there's hard work that needs to be funded, and our faculty need to be supported in that work. So there is dialogue going on about funding of CPL. I'm going to hand it off to Sigrid. She has the big one with post, and we have about 13 more minutes.
Oh, don't give me that pressure, right? Good morning, everyone. It is an honor to be one of the facilitators for this group. Again, I'm Sigrid Williams, CPL coordinator at Norco College. I'm also an ADJ faculty member at Norco College, retired police officer, and I also wear a lot of other hats at the district level and with ASCCC. I was excited about the idea that we could crosswalk our ADJ courses with post-learning domains and give transferable CPL to those that graduate a police academy in California. This was a huge endeavor that took hundreds of hours to complete. We began in March of this year with subject matter experts from 6 colleges from throughout the state. We had deep conversations about what, if any, credit we could give our adult learners with an accredited post certificate. We also took into consideration the different legislative assembly bills that were being introduced and actively sought to become law regarding our law enforcement professionals. Next slide, please. So as I mentioned in the previous slide, everyone on the statewide work group, and I do mean statewide, as you can see in the graphic, met twice a month since March to accomplish our mission of awarding CPL to those that have successfully completed a post-accredited police academy. Our subject matter experts, our faculty, also wear many other hats, as you can read on the right-hand side of your screen. This statewide work group was well-rounded, and they brought a lot of experience at all levels. Next slide. So police officer authority in California comes from a variety of legislative authority and the state accreditation body POST. One of the first conversations we had included that while the minimum number of hours are 664, everyone in the work group agreed that our academies throughout the state are well over 1,000 hours, and some are even higher than 1,200. We also agreed that if we were going to do this right, we needed to align all 42 post-learning domains and teaching and testing specifications with our courses within the Administration of Justice program. Next slide. So we began with an Excel spreadsheet, and we determined what information we needed to capture to begin our alignment and crosswalk. We collected our ADJ courses that had CID numbers first. We included descriptors, objectives, and content. Then we went to the 6 colleges in the statewide work group, and we crosswalked our courses and our descriptions and our learning domains with those CIDs. Next slide. So this is a visual of our first 4 columns within our workbook. We had our CID, the descriptors, the objectives, the content. Next slide. And this example, and I know it is small, shows you the colleges and their courses that aligned with the CID. The last column is where the majority of the work took place. And when I say the majority of the work, I'm talking about well over 400 hours. We identified which of the learning domains aligned with our learning outcomes. They may not be absolute, but as Terence mentioned earlier in Title V, it states that it needs to be similar. So we weren't so worried about the words in their absolute form. So here for our introduction to ADJ, there were 9 learning domains that actually aligned with our one course, that ADJ 1 course, and our learning outcomes. Next slide. We then made it a little easier to show the crosswalk, and visibly we started to show the alignment. So as you can see here with number 4, it says demonstrate an understanding of the history, structure, and function of police. This was basically the verbiage that came from our learning domains. If you looked at learning domain 2.2.A, you could read that section right there, and that's pretty similar in nature. So with that, we said, yes, that learning domain is mentioned here just in this one LD2. We also have other LDs that are in here as well. You can look at number 5, LD 2.3A through C. This is talking about the judicial component, which happens to be the second component within our criminal justice system. Next slide, please. Here is the visible credit recommendation of the work group. We said that students that graduate a police academy successfully should be given up to 30 units. 8 of the, or 24 units aligned with 8 courses that have CIDs. One is an elective course. And then, of course, we included Area E, which is the physical training and health education. We have some colleges that have already begun to revamp their curriculum to make this recommendation align with their transferable degrees versus their non-transferable degrees. Next slide. So our outcomes are groundbreaking and will change the lives of many of our police officers that do not have a college degree. Just to give you a little bit of research, currently it shows that 50.3% of our police officers here in California have an associate's degree or higher. That leaves 50% roughly, or 49.7% of the 117,400 police officers in the state an opportunity to earn CPL for their academy and work experience. We are, of course, student and community centered, giving credit where credit is deserved, reducing the redundancy that are currently occurring with officers having to take courses that we've identified as material covered in the academy. It reduces the cost of education, and it reduces and or eliminates equity issues. And you can see by the 2 posters that are here, please go back, thank you. Bakersfield has already begun marketing CPL for their academy graduates, giving 24 units for their criminal justice program. And Norco College, just to give you a different one, is marketing CPL for business administration by offering 9 units of college credits to licensed realtors. Next slide. So Dr. Lee already talked about Captain Milligan. He was given 21 units towards his transferable ADT, and he is on his way to earn his ADT next semester. Again, transferable units, which now will go into the CSU system. This allows him for pay raises and promotions, and now being made available to him because of his work and because of our work with CPL. Next slide, please. What we are accomplishing with all CPL through the MAP initiative is taking our individual colleges and articulations and bringing them together and holding them in one repository. This becomes a win-win for all of our community colleges in the state. Just as Chancellor Christian said in her presentation, CPL is at the forefront of her Vision 2030. Next slide. As it says, our work is important. The California MAP Initiative is bridging working adults and veterans with educational advancement through CPL. We have had deep conversations about procedures and best practices as it relates to CPL. To best serve our statewide or our students statewide, we need to share our processes for creating, approving, and awarding transferable credits for prior learning. We also need to store the information in one centralized repository, and that is MAP. This is innovative, it's bold, and it will change the lives of our students. And now, just to throw a different plug out there in about 15 seconds, we are about to begin a statewide work group for corrections. If your college offers any correction certificate or degree and would like to be part of this work, we are looking for faculty to be part of that correction statewide work group. And I'll go ahead and throw my email address in the chat, so please reach out to me. We're going to begin this work in about 2 weeks. Thank you.
Yeah, wow, my misspellings in the chat are pretty bad. So I apologize. I'm trying to go back and forth with the answers or continue the dialogue. Sigrid, thank you so much. And please jump in as we talk about the strike team and next steps. We only have a few more minutes. But folks, what you've put into the Padlet already is great intel for us as a MAP initiative. As Sigrid stated, if you have anybody that's interested in corrections, or in being on a statewide work group, if you specifically are a CPL coordinator and you work in, say, foreign languages, and you're like, hey, I want to look at the DLPT from the U.S. military, from the Department of Defense, and see what the crosswalk would look like with that standardized exam to our foreign languages, put that in the questions in the Padlet. Natalie, if you can add the Padlet again in the chat, just add content there, because you're going to feed us, and then we can help your institution, but you're also helping the full state scale this up and really, in my opinion, giving equitable treatment across our campuses. Next slide. Okay, let's skip through again. Okay, next steps you can take. We only have a couple minutes, so I want to jump into the next steps. Really involve faculty leadership. Get your Senate on board. Be transparent about this, where we are not trying to take away your courses. We're trying to feed you students into your courses at the right time, at the right place, and give them the credit that they deserve, right? It's not about removing students from the classroom. It's getting them to the right slot in the classroom and getting them to graduation, transfer, and certificates. when we talk about building your CPL strike team, we're talking about meeting probably every other week. That takes a commitment from your administration to give release time or give stipends and support. You heard Chancellor Christian say, we want you to have a CPL coordinator, CPL counselor, and a committee, right? Those were things directly from the state chancellor saying, we want your administration to fund this so you have the time to do the good work for your students, right? And we really shouldn't be looking at that as on the wrong side of the 50% law, in my opinion. That is faculty work that's directly leading to the classroom. So you look at this CPL team that we suggest. You also do want to have an administrator in there so they understand the true cost, right? If you want these students coming back, our K-12 population is shrinking. If we want to sustain public education, we need to have that head count. We provide a great product to our students, but there's a huge population in our community, the adult population, that aren't coming to our campuses. They're going elsewhere. Next slide. Identifying disciplines on your campus, doing an environmental scan. What articulations already exist? Who's working with ROPs, right? You have CTE programs that are working with your local ROPs, so they understand that articulation and that crosswalk process. They might even do credit by examination as the capstone exam in the ROP course or the local high school course, right? So know that you have some folks that are more likely to understand this. Identify your local industry and transfer needs. Talk to your local Cal State. What type of students, what's a growing or shrinking program, and what's a job sector that they're looking for, folks? And you can find those crosswalks and those pathways from Department of Defense, your local military institution or industry, into your campus, and then back out to the Cal State. Next slide. Y'all already gave us some really good suggestions in the Padlet. Thank you. Please keep adding those in. But here are some upcoming work groups that we foresee in the next year. Typically, Sigrid or myself will facilitate the group. I'm a counselor, so I'm the advocate, but I try to allow, give that space where I'm just setting up those meetings. And you know what? If someone in fire technology says these student learning outcomes in this academy just don't fit with what we teach, it needs to be a no. Right? We need to make sure that there's close alignment, not direct. It needs to be similar, but there might be so many gaps that it's insurmountable and we shouldn't be giving credit, right? Sometimes a no is very important. I did put in the chat, know that students per Title V have the ability to accept, decline, or appeal all those decisions. Right? So it's not always going to be transcribed just because someone had that learning. Here are some of those areas that we're looking at. If you have a faculty member or you're a CPL coordinator would like to get involved, contact us. We'll have the contact information at the end of this presentation and in the main session. All right, folks, we do have just 1 minute left before they put us into the main session. We are coming back for session 2, where we will be covering implementation. So know that they're going to cut us out of this section here in about 30 seconds anyway. So do make your way back to the main breakout room. Save that Padlet link, and please don't leave the full meeting. Leave the breakout room to go to the main session. That's a mistake many people make.